Across the world, philanthropy levels seem to be wavering.
And with an economic crisis on the horizon, it begs the question, are philanthropists doing enough?
A lot of people have begun to talk about the types of philanthropy, which is more effective, who should be giving, who shouldn't be giving. And I think over the past couple of years, we've started to see a new type of philanthropist emerge. With the rising amount of people across the world who are becoming billionaires and millionaires, it's beginning to beg the question of whether these people should be giving a lot of their wealth away or whether they should be keeping it to themselves. I think there's two sides to the argument. One is that these people earned their money themselves and they're entitled to do what they wish with it. And the other argument is, should anybody be sitting on that amount of money? We have people like Jeff Bezos, who's worth 117.5 billion. And he's recently pledged to give most of his fortune away across his lifetime, which seems fairly generous. But how much of a dent is that going to cause him, really? He's also said that he's already parted with over 2.4 billion across his professional career. It's a nice gesture. It makes sense. It gives people hope. But the question is, where is the money going to go? Who will then be in control of that money? What type of philanthropic activities will he pledge his money to? We also have what's a fairly new phenomenon, which is the celebrity philanthropist. A lot of musicians, sports people are beginning to give their money and give their time to different causes. In 2020, we had Marcus Rashford, who topped the Sunday Times giving list for his campaign against food poverty. We have Lewis Hamilton, who's given a lot of his time and a lot of his money to a few different causes. And it's almost like these public figures who are famous for their talent and for their careers, they aren't as criticized as the billionaires, because no matter how much money a billionaire will give, people are always going to want more.
It's quite interesting. I saw something that said a billionaire, regardless of what they give their money to or how much they give, because they are a billionaire, and in his case, over 100 billion, he's kind of damned if he does and damned if he doesn't.
Yeah.
People are always going to think, oh, but he could do more. He could give to more. Why is he prioritizing this? And I think that's the kind of sticky thing. Who gets to decide where that money goes? And if it is a sizable chunk, that's a lot of power for one person or one person's foundation to have over the world. It's almost as powerful as democracy. So success in America is measured kind of differently to that in the UK. And it's more along the lines of how much money a person can make, as well as how open-handedly they give away that money. And someone like Bill Gates, I don't know exactly how much he's given away with the Gates Foundation, but it's a considerable amount. But he still is on the record saying that obviously he's an advocate for philanthropy. He does it himself, but he's a massive advocate for higher taxes. He said that I've paid more taxes than any individual ever, and gladly so. I should pay more.
It's been reported that US fundraising is some of the most developed fundraising in the world. It's been said that highly skilled campaigners are able to build long-term relationships with those billionaires and philanthropists who are able to donate large sums of money, who are able to support different organizations. One of the main organizations in America that receive donations are faith organizations. In 2021, they received just under 30% of all donations. In America, there's a tradition of America's wealthiest dynasties sort of giving money to their interests. It's hard to understand how different types of philanthropy can work if there's always going to be some form of vested interest.
That's a really interesting point. I was reading a Guardian article titled How Philanthropy Benefits the Super Rich. And a point in it that they made is that the philanthropy that, maybe has always been around is elite, and it's funded by the elite. And like you said, it's certain schools. 2007 to 2017, 1.04 billion pounds of philanthropic money was given to arts and culture, whereas only 222 million was given to education. And it is exactly what you said. It's about having a vested interest, and it's understandable in a way. Like, they want to help the people or the institutions that they are closely linked to. They want to help the institutions that their children are at. And whose kind of decision is it? Who has the say of what they can do with that money?
I think especially when you find somebody who's willing to give a significant amount of money to a cause, that almost puts them in control of everyone who already exists within that certain cause. And with everything else in the world, we kind of frown upon monopolizing certain sectors, certain industries. Whereas I feel like there's a very blurred line in between where philanthropy can be monopolized and where it can't be. For example, how are we supposed to encourage people to donate their money and their time to eradicating extreme poverty when if one person donates significantly more towards eradicating and reducing poverty, do they then have the monopoly on poverty, or are they just helping more?
Do they have more power over the say of where that's going to go?
Yeah, and to which areas and what types of people? Do we support women living in poverty? Do we support children in poverty? This
is the interesting part of whether philanthropy should kind of carry on going down the path it's on, or should the super rich who do give to charitable organizations just pay more taxes, because then the government, a publicly elected body, will then decide where to allocate that money? It's a hard question.
I don't know. It's tricky.
It is. And that just made me think of something that I saw about the Gates Foundation. And obviously they basically eradicated polio. I think it was primarily in African countries. But the argument was that obviously it was an issue there, but it wasn't the most pressing issues in the locals' opinion. But the Gates Foundation chose to put the money into eradicating polio and not maybe the expansion of like sanitation or clean water or like education in the area. It's almost like another form of white savior complex.
Yeah.
Which, is a really tricky argument, because the people are doing good. And it's going back to damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
It's really hard, and society is never going to agree on one thing because we're all different. We all have our different opinions and our, lived experiences.
We all have our priorities.
Exactly. And I think it's quite easy to look at someone with a lot of money and be like, how could your priorities not align with mine?
Yeah. Everyone has a vested interest. Everybody wishes they can help, but there's no way you'll ever be able to help everyone and everything. So I think maybe the social pressure and the societal pressure that comes onto philanthropists themselves almost needs to come to a halt.
This is an interesting thing. It was Warren Buffett who said this. He said, "My wealth is not only a product of my own hard work, it's also resulted from a strong economy and lots of public investment." By that, he means it's public funded money, investments in something like schools, free libraries, museums, which has given him, the background to go on to be this really successful person and did earn all this money, but he didn't just suddenly have all this knowledge, this business investing knowledge. So is it, I don't necessarily know if I agree with this, but this was in an article, like, is it actually all their own money to do with as they wish? It is. I don't know if there's a right answer, really. I don't know if there is.
And I'm not sure there needs to be.
No, because with all this talk about philanthropy, I think the more talk about philanthropy, at some point along the way, philanthropists, they have Twitter. They can probably see what people are saying about them if they choose to, for an extreme example, but Elon Musk buy Twitter instead of, solving world hunger. People are always going to be able to see the criticisms about them. And that may make people want to give less, because
kind of brings on the mindset of, if they aren't doing it, then why should we? If
we attack, I don't have a perfect example for it, but if we attack a philanthropist like Jeff Bezos for having so much money and giving away something like 2.7 billion of it, that's still a lot of money, more. I think a fifth of what the UK population gave away in a year. It's a considerable amount of money to come from one man's pocket. People are still attacking him for it. And, if I was him, I'd be like, well, what's the point? You could so easily go down that path and just decide not to do it. It can be quite a divisive thing.
So I was reading this thing about how charity work is normally seen as sort of immediate relief, whereas I think philanthropy is seen as more of a long-term solution. It's a way for people to create different strategies and interventions.
It's like the philanthropy of giving to a university like Oxford. People give and then they have a building built in their name, or a library built in their name, and that's a long term, hundreds of years. Hopefully people will be able to enjoy that. Whereas charity is, I'm just thinking of a COVID reaction. So charity, in terms of COVID-19, there was a lot of immediate action, from someone like Marcus Rashford.
I did actually see this morning that one of our MPs, Zara Sultana, she tweeted about removing charitable status from private schools, which I think is really closely connected to what you said about donating to different universities and having libraries named after people. The tweet said removing charitable status from private schools would raise £1.7 billion, which was almost twice as what's needed to fund free school meals. So I think maybe this idea of different people donating to certain causes,
it almost like divides even more, because when some people want to give to a school that they went to, they're just perpetuating inequality in a way. But then who are we to decide who they give their money to? It is really hard because it's not like either of us are in a position to give away 2.7 billion of our wealth like Bezos did. And he's still getting, a lot of shtick for it because it's not enough, but it's still a considerable amount. I think he's using that each year he uses a chunk of that to give to charities that help with like families dealing with homelessness in the US and Puerto Rico and Colombia. But then there's also another kind of bracket of the foundation, which is setting up preschools for kids aged 3 to 5. And that's, a fraction of his wealth, but that's still doing amazing things.
Yeah.
It was like Andrew Carnegie, I think. He was like one of the first American philanthropists, and he donated the equivalent of something like 54 billion in today's money. But no one really thinks about how he got that money in the first place. And he actually cut his workers' wages like drastically. And then he chose to give away his money how he seemed fit. Instead of distributing income the way that you should, he then chose to give it to whoever he wanted to after. I mean, it's like Amazon not paying their workers properly. But Bezos is giving away to philanthropy. Like, at what cost?
It's a tricky subject.
It is.
It's a really tricky subject. And I think the more people talk about it, maybe the more people are aware of this situation, the better it will get, the more people may start stepping more carefully when it comes to giving their wealth away. And I think there are some great examples across the world of people who are making a real difference with long-term effects.
Yeah.
However, is it fair to judge these people like Jeff Bezos for starting now when we still haven't seen the effects?
Yeah. We're judging them for what they don't achieve with their wealth rather than what they do achieve with their wealth. Giving someone negative feedback is never a way for someone to grow in any example. But everyone's always going to have their own opinions because we're all individuals. We all have our own lived experiences, our own histories. We're going to have our own ideas of what is right and wrong, really.
Yeah.
But then does that not loop back to the people that are uber wealthy? Their ideas of what are right and wrong, they're going to give their money to what they think is right. And then they are accumulating power by doing that. It's just the rich now maintaining more power than an elective government. I don't know. Or could that be the way that it's going?
I think it very well could be. And I think with that comes bad and good.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. I wouldn't personally want someone like Elon Musk or Bezos running the world. Yeah.
No, I can't say I would. So this week's episode has obviously been quite a perplexing one. We seem to have learned quite a lot with what we've been reading, especially about philanthropy. Quite a big difference from last week's episode where we spoke about those 3 children in Nepal who had been cured by the Tej Kohli and Ruwa Foundation. But yeah, no, we think it's important to have these discussions and try and understand and learn along with an audience and have the discussions that some might find uncomfortable. Say the things that people might be uncomfortable to say.
The stuff that we found is in the news, but I never saw it like headline news.
No, not at all.
There are probably other pressing matters that affect people as well right now, but that's why I think this podcast I enjoy doing it, because we do get to talk about things and educate ourselves along with hopefully some listeners, or they can have their own opinions about what we learn.
That was our second episode of To See or Not to See
on philanthropy.